very simple. If you decide you're going to be a basketball player and you're focused on it, then you think about this. It's very reasonable. That's your motivation for what you're doing, isn't it? That's your purpose, your goal. So if you woke up one day and you forgot that you were a basketball player, then you go eat the wrong food. You'd forget to go to training, wouldn't you? So you've got to remind yourself. And so when it's so automatic, you don't have to remind yourself anymore, do you? You've got it, you know it. Well, that's what we're trying to do here. No way do we remember we're trying to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I mean, it's like so remote, you know. We're so far from wanting to be a basketballer, it's ridiculous. So every day you remind yourself, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of my life? What is my goal? To become a Buddha, to benefit sentient beings. So, of course, it's obvious. When you decide, I'm going to be a basketball player, guess what? It defines your choices. It determines your choices, doesn't it? It's not some religious idea. It determines your choice. When you remember what you want to do, then you'd never do anything that would contradict being a basketballer. You just wouldn't. Do you see? It's very simple. We do it in everyday life. So it's not some religious idea, you know. It's just remembering your goal. So, you don't have to want to be a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, but that's the plan here. So if you want to, subscribe to that, that's okay. You can decide, Maybe you go away and, like when I was talking to some Lutherans from Germany, from Switzerland, Lutherans, years ago in Kathmandu. We talked about bodhicitta and the goal of becoming a Buddha to benefit sentient beings and continuing to be reborn in countless lives to benefit sentient beings. And they said, thank you very much. How boring. We want to go to heaven and be with God straight after this life. Thank you. So, it's up to you. You mightn't want to be a Buddha, but that's up to you. But that's the plan here. This is the goal here. This is Buddha school, not basketball school, not going to heaven school. So it's up to you to decide which one you want. So if it makes sense to you, just think, okay, that sounds good. Buddha says that's our ultimate potential. It's just actually who we really are, this potential Buddha. This is what we finally really are. What defines us is our Buddha potential. What defines, that person is their basketballer potential. So then may I listen to these teachings, remind myself, listen to these teachings so I can find the tools, so I can do exactly that, become a Buddha so I can be of benefit to others, because that's the job of a Buddha. That's the function of a Buddha. Full of compassion and full of the ability to benefit others. You just don't sit in the sky looking holy, So we can express that in this prayer. The first two lines are expressing our reliance upon the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shog Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shog Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shog. Okay. Oh, I forgot my book. Betty. The copy of the book, Becoming the Buddha. Becoming the Compassion Buddha. It's probably on my desk or the computer, one or the other. Yeah. So let's just look again at this overall packaging that we've been describing, the one that came from Atisha, and that little text he wrote back in the 11th century when he got to Tibet and he saw they'd lost the plot after a couple of hundred years of practicing Buddhism. So he took all the essential points of all of Buddha's extensive teachings, philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, meditation, and he just took them and took the essential piece from each and put them in this graded order, in this structure of a course, basically. Just like the people who put together all the courses we ever study, you put the information together in a nice, orderly way so that you can experience it according to your capability, step by step. Very intelligent. It's how we learn everything, And this is what Atisha did back in the 11th century. And so this is a little text called Lamp for the Path, the light that guides you on your path, The light, it's the methods that guide you to your goal. And the term that's being used for that packaging on the basis of that is this lamrim, path graded, path gradual. As I said, a quaint way for calling it, naming it a course. As soon as we hear the word course, we understand exactly. Well, that's what this is. So the first things to think about, some preliminary contemplations to do to sort of prime you to get ready to enter the Course, thinking of it like that. As we've been saying, the first, and this is particularly appropriate for us in the West, just to look at what the mind is, because we have such a different view. So we need to be on the same page as the Buddha, you know. So this is to see what the nature of mind is, basically. It's beginninglessness. It's therefore, it's not having been created by anybody else, the biggest surprise to us of all. Thanks, Betty. That it's not coming from a superior being, and it's not coming from the parents. Like I said, you know, the materialists and most religions share one thing in common, at least. They both believe that someone else created them, which for Buddha is an absurdity. The parents gave you a body, very kind. It's got nothing to do with a superior being. Buddha even uses, like we've said, the word superior being. You know, it sounds like God when you listen to the qualities of a superior being. So the Christians call that God, and they call that a creator. They call that the source of everything else. Buddha would say that indeed is that those qualities of omniscience and omnipotence and all infinite compassion are the qualities of the potential of every mind. But the potential of every mind, it's not something up in the sky. It's something outrageous, it's something extraordinary, but it's the natural potential of every mind. Those qualities, you know. Mind. The mind. So the mind, remember, is not, you know, is not the brain, but of course exists in dependence upon the brain. That's evident, isn't it? But the mind is all your thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, all the way to the subtle, a very subtle degree. Buddha would say that we've got far more to the mind than just the tip of the iceberg that we access in day-to-day life, which is the conceptual and the sensory. We've got these subtler levels of awareness. Then, you know, this mind doesn't come from anyone else, and it's a product of cause and effect. So if it's cause and effect, it's beginningless. You can't come to any other conclusion, because if you assert something had an absolute beginning, like a big beginning, that assumes there was nothing before it, doesn't it? So if you're positing cause and effect, that is clearly an absurdity. You're just contradicting yourself. Because it's not possible for there to literally be nothing and then suddenly a flower to manifest right there, out of air. Because flower is a product of causes and conditions. Everything we can point to in this universe is a product of causes and conditions. And we all know you need to be very precise in getting the right causes and conditions together to get the microphone, get the flower. Well, that's what Buddha's saying about the mind too. So mind is not physical, it is its function. Its function is to cognize. Actually, if you think of it, you know, this is the kind of precision that you need, we do need, which we don't use when it comes to emotions. Spiritual things. You need to define something. In order to even discuss it, you need to define it. And if you look at a definition, it's very, very straightforward. A definition has two parts. You know, if I want to say, pass me the cup, what's the cup, you'll say? You don't know. I've got to then say, it's that flat-bottomed clay, you know, thing with a handle there. And it tells you what it is in its character. But you're not quite satisfied yet. But what does it do? What's its job? What's its function? Oh, it holds my tea. What are spectacles? They're these metal, you know, oval-shaped metal things with arms that have glass in them. What do they do? Oh, they enable you to see. So you need to know that about everything in order to discuss. You know, we say, I love you, and, you know, I say, I love you, and you say, oh, I love you too. And we actually think we're using the same terminology. We are using the same terminology, but oh my goodness, we have got completely different definitions though. You think it means, you know, I'm going to live with you and you're going to make me happy and I think this and this and this. And then you think, well, you're going to cook for me and you're going to do this. You know, we both have our own really strong, clear definition. No wonder we get divorced after a month, you know, because we didn't define our terms. I said pass a cup and you gave me a toilet. You get my point here? So we don't think, we know again we've got to be precise when it comes to microphones and numbers. But we don't think we have to be precise when it comes to feelings and emotions. We think, oh, I'm allowed to think what I like. Well, you are, but it won't help you. You've got to be precise. We've got to be on the same page. That's why you've got to go to mediators. Because I say one thing and I think you know what I mean, but I've got my own elaborate meaning there. And when you look at the way we communicate, it's like we're speaking different languages to each other because of this problem. But if we start talking about math, we don't have any problem. We don't argue about math. We go to the most sophisticated level of inquiry when it comes to math, because we've got our basis deadly clear, and we all know that 1 and 1 is this, and plus is this, and minus is that. And if we didn't know, we'd have to be on the same page before we discussed. But we don't think that when it comes to our relationships. You know, we think, oh, that sounds awfully clinical. Well, it's practical. And Buddha has that same clarity and precision when it comes to this stuff that we're dealing with that we have when it comes to microphones and gardens, you know. That's why we're geniuses at this, but lousy at the other one. And that's why the Buddhists, the Tibetans, are not very good at making microphones. They even talk about an arm's length. Now that's really precise, isn't it? They don't know when they're born. These things aren't so important, but they know exactly what love is and what attachment is and what this is and what that is and how to get realizations. They have the internal wisdom. We've got plenty of external wisdom, but internally we're like infants, you know. Well, may I suggest. So mind, its definition is that which is clear, and they mean here not physical, and that which cognizes. So the function of mind is to cognize, or to be aware. These are synonymous. Or to simply, merely to know. So we think of knowledge as like a big bucket of something you hold in yourself that you full of things. But it's the mere job of cognizing something, isn't it? To know something is to cognize. It's the same meaning. So that's the job of the mind. Its job is to cognize. Its job is to be aware. To know. And so to know what? To cognize what? That which exists. So right now, this is the point, isn't it? Buddha is saying we are not in touch with that which exists because we've got the mind polluted by all these fantasies, these delusions, these liars that prevent us from seeing that which exists. So we've got to learn to know that which exists. Because why? Because that's wisdom. And wisdom, having wisdom is what brings happiness. The extent to which we are caught up in delusions, Buddha says, is the extent to which you're not happy. Because you're living in fantasy worlds. Because you say, pass me an apple, and you pass me a banana, so we're going to argue. Because we've got different definitions of things, because we've got delusions in our minds. So there's no going forward. We just go around in circles and go crazy. So we've got to remove from the mind these delusions. Then we see things as they are, and that brings bliss. Just naturally, that brings happiness. Fear is the nature of the delusions, and fear is coming from ignorance. And ignorance is the function, the ground of all the delusions. They're fantasies. So of course, if you think about it, for life after life after life after life, you've been thinking that 2 is 3. You'd be going mad. You would be going mad because you're never getting the table, you're never getting the microphone, nothing would work. It happens to be the tool that we're using. It's just an example I'm using. So then if all your life depended upon having to build trees and things and, you know, build tables and things, and you never got the numbers clear, you never understood why, well, then you'd be going nuts. You'd be very frustrated and very miserable and very angry, and then you blame people and all this nonsense, you know, because you're not clear. You're not clear. The mind is full of fantasies. So wisdom, it sounds so abstract. It was like an old man with a beard in the sky, you know. Oh, very wise. We think of an old person, wise person. Excuse me, wisdom just means accurate. If you say there's 2 cups here, that's not wisdom. It's ignorance. There's one. So what we've got to see, as we've been talking, you know, to see the way those delusions, that pollution works. But anyway, that's jumping into the middle scope there. But that's okay, we were talking about it. But so just the basic points about the mind we need to know at the beginning. It's nature, it's beginninglessness, it's non-physicality, it's not having been created by anyone else, and that it's therefore your own. But crucially, it's potential. It's potential. It's potential. That's why you engage in anything, because you can see there's an end result. You know, you can make cakes, you can become a footballer, you can become a Buddha. It's not just some kind of superficial thing you're supposed to feel every day, you know. It's got a purpose. There's an end result. It's a course. So this mind has this potential, and Buddha would say, in fact, it's naturally pure. That's its nature. And he calls that goal, that perfection, Buddhahood, enlightenment. And it's a psychological state. That's it. So if it is true we've got this potential, we better find someone to show us how to achieve it. And that's the finding of the teacher, which we talked about. And then we would do this contemplation that Atisha sort of cobbled together based on Buddha's teachings. He says we really need to energize ourselves to even want to practice. So we've got to think a little bit about the advantages of this life that we've got. And all we've got to do is compare. You know, it's like market research. You just compare the quality of lives of other people. Not being rude or anything, just comparing and realizing, oh my God, how fortunate I am. I don't have to work all day for a grain of rice. I'm not completely insane. I'm not so ill that I can't even think. I'm not in a war zone. You know, I'm not being raped every day. I'm not in prison. You know, I've got extraordinary leisure, intelligence, good qualities, people supporting me, enough money. And the miracle of all of this is it gives me access to the inner aspirations, which we all have, but if you're overwhelmed by insanity or gross suffering, you can't access those. You know, it's too much of a luxury, isn't it? But we have the ability, because we have the leisure, to access this mind of ours, to ask, to listen to the questions that we all have, and then to pursue them. And the miracle is we have places to go, you know. It's not as if it's forbidden to go to spiritual centres. So we're so lucky there's so much available in the world we live in these days. So we have all these extraordinary conditions, and we don't have all the suffering that other humans, that so many humans have. Not even to mention all the animals, if you can even go there, you know. To think of the vast majority of all sentient beings that we can see are animals and creatures, then forget it, you know, what chance do they have? They've got the same potential as we have. This is the point. They've had this opportunity, countless lives. So now that we have it, the idea here is to think, oh my God, what a fool I am to waste this precious resource. Then you enter the first grade in junior school. And you take Buddha's classic teachings on impermanence. But they're very extensive, and they talk deeply about subtle impermanence. But Atisha gets the gross level, and he gets the very personal one of death. And his agenda is very specific, as I said. It's to, on the basis of having thought about this perfect human rebirth, you then think, well, my goodness, it's really fragile. It's definitely going to end. And you know what? I don't even know when it will. So you really come to the point, well, what's important? What's the point here? And you really, you reassess, you check your priorities. So that energizes you to not waste this life. And then you can contemplate the likely possibilities of different types of rebirth. All these psychological possibilities, this vast spectrum of possibilities that Buddha's asserting. You know, God realms, human, animal, predators, you know, spirits, hell realms, all of which are just experiences created by those sentient beings themselves. These realms aren't places where you're sent, which is how we think about heaven and hell and everything. They're mentally created, karmically created by each person. So then you think, well, I don't want that, thanks a lot. I'd rather not be a rat. I'd rather not be a mouse. I'd rather not be an insect. I'd rather not be an eel. And looking why, seeing the suffering minds, the anger, the aggression, the inability to change, you know, the fear, the attachment, all the things that we know about. Remember, Buddhist psychology refers to all beings, not just humans. So you can use your own experiences to see. So then you think, well, whom can I turn to give me the methods to stop this ridiculousness, you know? So here we turn to the Buddha, his Dharma, the Sangha. And then you start putting your money where your mouth is. Then you start practicing the next point, the culmination of this first scope, junior school. You abide by the laws of karma. And you've given yourself a lot of reasons you've primed yourself. You've really motivated yourself. You could just say, okay, let's abide by the laws of karma. You know, you could start there, because that is what practice is. But these are the things that you use to prime your mind, to give you a deep logical reason why you should. So then you think about karma. You think about how the things that you do, say, and think have an impact upon you, are creating you moment by moment. And then if you continue to follow the neurotic actions of harming others, then you sow negative proceeds in your mind that when you die will ripen as your suffering. And thank you very much, you don't want that kind of suffering. But this, you know, you'll try to abide by the 10 non-virtues. Don't do them. It's a good checklist. Good enough. Not too deep level of practice at this point, but it's got a pretty incredible. You need to really learn to control your body and speech and have a logical reason of why you're doing it, not just because someone told you. And you're protecting yourself. It's purely for your own sake. But of course, everyone else is going to be very happy. The rats and roaches will cheer because they're going to get a life now. You know, your husband will be happy because you're not going to badmouth him. People will be glad that you're putting yourself together for your sake, you know. It'll have this indirect result in the world. So by now you're pretty developed, you harness your energy, you die with a happy mind, like whatever, get a decent life. But you can move to the second scope. You can continue now the work, and now you really start working deeply in the mind. You get to the source. You get to the source of the problems, which is the mind. And in the mind, among the positive, negative and neutral states of mind, the ones we have to home in on are the negative ones. Why? Because they're the ones that cause suffering. So we're continuing on the wisdom wing, the emphasis of which is to remove the causes of suffering from yourself because you want happiness, and that's the method for you to get happy. The first level is you control your body and speech. Now you begin to control your mind. Another way of looking at this is the first level of practice, abiding by the laws of karma, prevents you from having the grossest suffering. By working on your mind and getting rid of all delusions, it prevents you from having even what's called the human life, which is still suffering. It's a subtle level of suffering. But another way to say it is you've got the gross level of suffering. In the Four Noble Truths is the suffering of suffering. And you've got the subtle level of suffering, which is the suffering of having attachment, and then the delusions that follow, which is what we mean by happiness, the attachment one. So it's looking at that, seeing how that's in the nature of suffering, and that takes time, because it's a honey-covered razor blade, attachment. Seeing how we're propelled, like the motor that propels us from day to day is this craving, this dissatisfaction, this aching sense of lacking, of not being, of not having, of missing something. And that's what propels us to search for things and ideas and concepts and people and smells and tastes and sounds that we hanker after, to get, convinced that when we get them, we'll get happy. So simply speaking, as I said, our method for getting happy is getting what attachment wants. Well, Buddha says it's a mistake. You'll never get happy. You just go crazy. You just get more dissatisfaction. As we all know, as my mother used to tell me, the more you get, the more you want. That's the nature of attachment. So attachment is the junkie mode, And that's how we get happiness now. So in the world, as we can see, we think you've got a problem if you're addicted to heroin or alcohol or cigarettes. We see it in terms of the object, don't we? We define the badness by the object. Well, the Buddha would say, of course, there are some objects that are more fierce than others. In other words, you can be attached to a nice person who is kind to you, or you can be attached to a person who beats you up. Obviously, they're different objects, but the attachment's the problem. Okay, it's extra problem if you get beaten as well, So the attachment in Buddhist terms is the point. It's the mind, the state of mind that misconceives things, that craves, that thinks when I get that I'll get happy. That's the problem. The object is indeed a problem, can be, but that's secondary. It's the mind that's the problem. So you're learning to look into your mind. And then you're looking at the other delusions, which are the result of attachment. Aversion mostly, which is the response when attachment is thwarted. Doesn't get what it wants. That's anger. Or depression, depending on how you experience it. And the other delusions, like jealousy, pride. Pride's an interesting one. We wouldn't think we have pride. We feel a bit offended if someone accuses you of being very arrogant, proud. We mostly don't think that. In fact, we mostly think we have that disease called low self-esteem, But it's a bit scary to hear it, but it's the flip side of pride. Let me explain. You'll see. You'll understand. So in the way that, like with love and attachment, and I'll say a bit more about that now in a second, we confuse love and attachment. We even use these words interchangeably, We really don't see the difference. But I'm going to go to pride in a second. I'll go back to love and attachment, okay? Then I'll go to pride. The thing was, because it's a similar example, we have, if you like, a sort of loose way to say it is there's a good and a bad side to our qualities, the way we think in the West, If we were to use love and attachment interchangeably, as we do in the West, well, the Western way to say it would be there's a good love and there's a bad love. If when it comes to pride, you could say there's a good pride and there's a bad pride. You could say it like that. But the Buddhist way of saying it is he gives different terms to the good ones and the bad ones. He says there are certain states of mind that in their nature are disturbing and delusional, so therefore are negative. And if you follow them, they'll cause you suffering and cause you to harm others. And that's just a fact. It's not a question of degree of it. It is simply that. So attachment, the name he gives to the neurotic one is attachment. The name he gives to the positive one is called love. What he means by love, as we said yesterday, and we're going to go into the compassion wing today, and then we're going to be talking about Lama's approach here. He defines love as the wish that another person be happy. That's the bare bones of it. And then, of course, as you grow it, it's the spontaneous affection, isn't it? You see a person and you delight in them. Your heart is moved by them. You delight. It's for them. It's altruistic. It's a positive state of mind. And it's necessarily not disturbing, and it's not delusional. But the trouble is now it comes along mixed with attachment, like milk and water, that you just can't distinguish. As I said, we don't even give them different names. So this is where my feeling is this Buddhist approach is super clear, because we have to learn, it's very skillful, to distinguish, but they're different voices. The voice, if you could experience a lot of love without much attachment, you would feel it as a very blissful, clear experience with wisdom. It's based in accuracy. It's connected to the other person. Reality, Buddha says, in general, is that things are interdependent. Things are interconnected. So that's a really good point, because if you look at when you're feeling loving towards a person, it's so hard to distinguish it from attachment. If affection is the main thing, then it's a very open, spacious, connected feeling. This sort of like this you and me together is a we. But if you've got mainly attachment, it's just I, separate from you. And it's fearful and neurotic. That's the voice of all the delusions. If you're learning to look carefully inside, the voice of all the delusions is a separate sense of I, cut off from you, isolated, bereft, lonely, fearful, grasping, needy, angry, jealous. They're all the neurotic voice. So we have to distinguish. It's sort of like you've got in your garden herbs and weeds that look so identical you just can't tell the difference. But in fact, if you eat one, it'll kill you, and if you eat the other, it'll nourish you. So you have to learn to see the difference, and this is the job. This is the inner job of being your own therapist, that you learn through learning skillful meditation techniques and then just day to day, watching yourself all the time, instead of only watching the other person, which is what we ever do. Like anything, you just learn to be good at it. In the beginning, like anything, it's difficult. So not to be distressed by that. It just takes time, you know. But attachment in its nature is deluded, polluted, neurotic, needy, a liar, extremely disturbing. So if you were to have it in 100% without any love to temper it, it would just be like a vampire, basically. You'd be like a vampire. If you have love purely, you'd be like a saint, you know, blissful, unbelievable, compassionate, wise, completely no thought of the neurotic self. You would have gone beyond it, which of course is what Buddha is saying we can achieve. So right now we have love and attachment, and we have them together. So this is where the job is, the really difficult job in our relationships, to distinguish between the two 1,000 times a day. Because, you know, if love's the one that wins out, then things will work, there'll be harmony. If attachment wins out, that's when you have the fight. That's when the thoughts afterwards, and you're hurt and upset and thinking about it, that's delusion's voice. That's not virtue's voice. If you've forgiven, if you let go, if you give the other person their way, you know, if you really do that, then you let go of it. It's a happy feeling, a light feeling. You feel like you've won something. It's like success, you know. And so, of course, in relationships, with partners, with children, that's the job all day that you're doing. I mean, people think, you know, people often... My family sometimes, my God, Robina, being a nun, isn't that difficult? It's easy. I'm sure it's easy in comparison with you guys having wives and husbands and children. I can't imagine it. If I were married, I'd have a dead wife, a dead husband and a dead children. Certain. It's a full-on job. It's like every single day, isn't it? That's right. My goodness. I admire you. That's practice. And success is when the virtue wins out. So you just keep developing those little successes until eventually the virtues become the ones that we can learn to follow. And then you will have no problems in your relationship. There will no reason to talk about things. We have this obsession in the West. We call it sharing. I think it's very, very wicked, you know. It's called dumping each other's stuff on each other. It's not sharing at all. It's because we cannot bear our own thoughts and feelings, and because we're convinced that it's your fault. So I have to tell you all about it. It's really too much to bear. It's too much for each other. You're asking too much of each other. This is why I think it is good to have a therapist or a really good friend that you can go dump it on and work it through. It's too much to ask the other person to work your stuff through with them, because when they got their stuff on you, I mean, it's like demanding each other to be so together. No wonder relationships fail. No wonder they're painful, you know. We demand far too much of each other. And you live in the same bed every day with no inch of space. At least if you have your own room, you'd enjoy each other's company more. I really think we're so stupid in the romantic notion in the West, you know, what we think relationships are meant to be. We're asking for trouble. Honestly. Not being cynical here. I mean, we all know that, what do they say? Familiarity, what? Makes the heart grow what? That's it. Isn't it? I mean, have a look at your lives, you know. Then we keep running back like a moth to the flame, hopping in the same bed again. Oh, just thinking about it gives me claustrophobia. Whew. Anyway, that's not Buddha talking, okay? That's me. But you understand my point here. When you've got attachment and anger and jealousy and depression, it is a lot to ask yourself. That's all I'm saying. We've got to, you know, you've got to know where you're at. Then you've got to be really skillful in giving yourselves a situation that's appropriate to where you're at. But of course, the very having of delusions means we don't have that wisdom. So of course, we make the mess, you know. But if we can learn from our mess, that's good. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you create lots of really strong virtuous karma when you make an effort. So surely, make it, you know, in a relationship, you always are making an effort to be kind, an effort to forgive, an effort to let go, an effort to give them their way instead of yours, and so on. So that's good. That's practice. It's painful, but it's practice. So the job is to distinguish between the virtues and the non-virtues, because right now they're mixed together like milk and water. That's it. Really hard to see. And because it's a new thing, as I said, we don't distinguish them in this way in the West. So then, you know, and the same with liking something. We get all fundamentalist when we hear the Buddha says we have to give up attachment. As Lama Zopa says, we go, oh, you mean I've got to give up my happiness, give up my heart? Not at all. You've just got to learn to be really discriminating, really precise in your understanding. So in your experience with the chocolate cake, you know, there's a whole series of things going on there in your mind, all simultaneously, because you've got it down to perfection. You've been doing it for countless lives. So, you know, there's a state of mind that is the ability to recognize. Your eye consciousness sees the shape and colour. It doesn't see a delicious chocolate cake. This is a big point. You've got sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. They're very distinct, as we discussed in the death process, you see. So but we confuse these, and we will say, oh, wow, look at that delicious chocolate cake. So we think our eyes are seeing a delicious chocolate cake. In fact, they're not. Eye consciousness, the senses, Buddha says, are like dumb, well, I'm saying this, dumb animals. They're very limited in their capacity for cognition. So eye consciousness cognizes merely two things, shape and colour. Ear consciousness, wow, listen to that divine Bach or Miles Davis, you know, I would say. I can't hear Miles Davis. My ear consciousness does not hear Miles Davis. My ear consciousness hears sound. That's it. The rest of it, the delicious divine chocolate cake, the divine Miles Davis, that is a story made up by your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. That's where all the stories are. That's where the fantasies are. That's where the truths are. That's where the happiness is. That's where the suffering is. And that's what we have to become familiar with. So eye consciousness triggers the experience, doesn't it? Maybe it's the nose consciousness first. You smell. And then that triggers your mental consciousness right then, instantly. And that triggers, it pulls up from your computer, your inner memory, your computer, the label chocolate cake. Right? You smell or you see the shape. It triggers that memory. And it triggers the memory of having tasted it before. It triggers the memory of having liked it before. Right? All of this. There's nothing wrong with saying it's a chocolate cake. That's a fact. There's nothing wrong with saying you liked it. That's a fact. And there's nothing wrong with liking. There's nothing wrong with happiness or pleasure. Please make the distinction. It's crucial to hear this. Pleasure, happiness are when the mind is delighted. The problem is now, Buddha says, the happiness we have is so polluted, it's like the happiness of the junkie. It's polluted, contaminated happiness. because of the method we use to get it. The method we use to trigger the happiness is attachment. It's very simple. The attachment is not the pleasure. The pleasure's the goal, isn't it? The attachment's our method, the one that is hyperventilating and thinking it's so divine and gorgeous and gets us all excited, and then we're believing that when I get it, I'll get that happiness. It's the only, in other words, it's the only method we know to get a good feeling. The only method we know to get a good feeling is to trigger, is to get one of the, usually one of the sense objects, isn't it? Or to think a certain thought. To think a certain thought, to see a certain thing, to touch a certain thing. That's the attachment part. And then the fantasy that it makes up. And then, on top of that, the belief that when I get it, I'll get that happiness. And then the searching for it, the getting of it, the hankering of it, and then the contact with the object. So it's true, it does trigger a nice feeling. That's why we do it. But all Buddha's saying is, he's not saying it's not happiness. He is just complaining about the quality of the happiness. He says it's really revolting happiness, Robina. If you begin to taste pure happiness, and don't think that's being all holy, uncontaminated pleasure, uncontaminated joy in the mind, you wouldn't want to touch that disgusting happiness again. In other words, when you really realize the suffering and the garbage and the craving and the manipulation and the nonsense that comes with the happiness that the heroin triggers at a relative level, then of course you all know the happiness you get when you finish that craving, the happiness you get when you've given that up, seems more mild, but it's a much more profound, pleasing, relaxing happiness, isn't it? Why? Because it's the happiness that you get when you've given up the craving. It's the happiness that's just there naturally in your mind. That's it. It's just the joy and the contentment that are naturally ours. So we're trying to access that. So happiness is what we already experience, and there's nothing wrong with the happiness that's triggered by when you taste the cake. But all the Buddha's saying, like I'm saying, is that the only way we know how to get any happiness now is by having to get an object, and that's the problem. So that's the junkie mode. All he's saying is we have the potential to have extraordinary happiness in our mind all the time, naturally. Which doesn't mean you can't enjoy cake. In fact, when you've given up attachment, you're going to enjoy the cake even more. It'll be so much more blissful for you. But you don't need to have the cake to get happy. This is the point. Whereas now, we're these vampires who just have to constantly suck the energy out of everything, trying to get it into ourself, this poor little bereft, empty self, That's the suffering of attachment. So then with the cake, so far everything's fine. You see it, you label it, you recall having liked it, and then you put it in your mouth. So before you even put it in your mouth, then the next state of mind, the one that takes the whole thing over, that's when attachment arises. And it's all simultaneous, they all come together. But attachment is what now runs the show. And that's the one that completely exaggerates the cake, completely exaggerates its function for you, completely dumps on top of it a whole series of qualities it doesn't possess, the ability to make you happy, all of these things. And so then you, with all this expectation that comes and this belief in this story that's like one instant, it takes 1 instant for it to arise because it's so autopilot, you now put the cake in the mouth. And you keep waiting for the happiness to come, don't you? That's why you have a second piece. You have a second piece. You have a third piece. You're waiting for the happiness to come. In the beginning, the excitement of the anticipation was so huge, wasn't it? You get the piece, the first mouthful. It's so delicious. There's no doubt. It's very delicious. But you look, there's two parts going on in our mind. There's the part of us that tastes the deliciousness, that thinks it's just so delicious. But there's another part that's instantly saying, give me more. This is not enough. It's really curious if you look at it. If it is so delicious, it should be enough for us. We should be able to sustain ourselves on that bit of pleasure. But the second we're having the pleasure, we're already craving for more because we haven't got satisfied yet. So we think, oh God, yeah, for sure, another mouthful will do it. And then by now you're up to the third piece and you're already getting very depressed because your stomach's full, the pleasure has gone, and it's really sad. So you're forced, you either just keep eating because you're on autopilot and you just can't stop because you're so depressed because the happiness didn't come, the satisfaction didn't come, the bliss didn't come, you missed it. And then you just eventually have to stop eating, because if you didn't, you'd vomit. That's how we have happiness, isn't it? Sorry being mean about it, but that's really summarizing our happiness. So the suffering of attachment isn't the pleasure that it triggers. Pleasure's great. The suffering of attachment is the lies that it tells, all the anticipation, all the belief, the hankering, the craving, the manipulating to get it, the expecting. This is the tragedy one. The main one is the expectation. The manipulating, you know. And then the possessing. When it's things and people, it's mine. It's like an extension of you. And then the fear of losing. Then the jealousy. Then the anger. All of those qualities would not exist if we didn't have attachment. They are the outcroppings of attachment. They're all expressions of the fundamental problem of attachment. If there were no attachment, it's impossible to be angry. Aversion or anger, impatience, annoyance, irritation, as we politely call them, are all the response to thwarted attachment every split second. Wouldn't be possible to be depressed if you didn't have attachment, or jealous, or arrogant. None of the other qualities. It's impossible to have any of those delusions without attachment. They're all naturally linked to each other. So all Buddha's saying is, hey guys, if you want to be happy, you've got to identify attachment, and you've got to go beyond it, because that's the method. That's his method. That's all. Simple. So simple. We say happiness is what we get when we get what we want. He says happiness is what you get when you get rid of attachment. Simple. 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 Uncomplicated. And it's right here. You don't have to go searching, which we do. You just have to go in here and do the job. That's the method. This is the second scope. The essence of the second scope. High school. Being your own therapist. Getting to the root of the problem. So these delusions, as I said, anger, that we've talked already, we often confuse anger with even compassion, which is really surprising. You know, we see someone suffering, we have compassion, but the next split second we're looking for the person to be angry with who did it to them. Isn't it? And we think they come together. But they're completely separate states of mind, and they're based on the misconception of there's no cause and effect. If you have the view of karma, anger wouldn't even arise, because anger is saying, how dare you do that to me? How dare you do that to them? It is not fair. Well, when you understand karma, you don't say those words. A very different view. But there's okay. So then you've got pride, arrogance, like I said. But we mainly are aware of what we call low self-esteem, this self-loathing. It's kind of fascinating. His Holiness the Dalai Lama heard about the extent of it in the West, and he said, that's a mental illness. Again, all the delusions have the characteristic of being I-centered, separate I, neurotic I, fearful I. The voice of all the delusions is naturally I, the neurotic I, okay? Scared I, poor me, badly done by me, that one. So let's look at this arrogance one. It's kind of interesting, and see how it's so linked to low self-esteem. I always think of an example, like if you think of two people who are really good at what they do, really, let's say two gorgeous-looking people, and they're both in a group of people. Think of it, this one. One has got arrogance, and one has got what we could call, let's say we just call it self-confidence. It's like the good quality. Let's give it that name. That isn't a delusion. Look at the difference. This is how it would be. The arrogant person, they're both gorgeous in the same way. The arrogant person, because arrogance is the neurotic I, it sounds big and strong, but it's actually like a little girl in there. Arrogance is attachment is an over-exaggerated view of the deliciousness of something. Aversion is the over-exaggerated view of the ugliness of something. Arrogance is the over-exaggerated view of the importance of somebody, yourself, of yourself. But because it's ego, it's fearful in its nature. It's a little girl in there. So then when you walk in, the person who's gorgeous walking into the room, the arrogance makes them super self-conscious. They're totally focused on I, and they're watching everybody else like a hawk, because it's the competitive mind that's basically terrified of meeting a person who is better than you at that. And so you're doing everything to keep yourself on the top, above the others. It's necessarily comparative, you know, competitive. And it's scared. And if you do really meet a person who's really better than you, it's devastating. What happens? You collapse, you deflate. And guess what? Low self-esteem. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so hopeless. I'm terrible. So you check the one we've got. We've only got low self-esteem because we've got pride. And what that means is, when you've got low self-esteem, when that person gets deflated now, and they see this person who's better than them, they're really kind of angry at them. How dare they be better than that? How dare they be more happy, more wise, more beautiful, have better toenails, nicer eyelashes, or whatever it might be? And you look at us with our need to be seen, which is our pride, because we don't know how to affirm ourselves, so we're hungry for other people to affirm us, to see that we're good. Look at me, see me, please, please praise me, say I'm good, you know. We need it, we don't even know it ourselves. So we will take the tiniest part of ourselves to think that's better than someone else's. It could be our eyelashes that are slightly longer, our toes are a better shape. I had good martial arts feet, apparently. Small and squat and strong, you know, not long skinny toes and everything, you know. So they're good martial arts feet. I used to be really arrogant about my feet. You can't see them, they're hidden. I mean, I liked my feet, and I remember seeing my feet. I'd look at other people's feet at karate, you know, because you've got bare feet. And I'd always mentally note the little other squat, fat feet that were good karate feet, you know. I mean, it's something so tiny, but you know what I'm saying. There can be the smallest thing about us. Our hair is slightly nicer, it's thicker, it's better, it curls nicer, it's more straight. Our ears are a better shape. We're desperate to find something about ourselves because we need to be affirmed. And then we compare it with others. Automatically. It's the nature of all the delusions. They're dualistic. That's pride. That's pride. So, of course, we walk around with low self-esteem. What does that mean? Everybody's more happy than I am, with better feet and better bodies and nicer this and better that. But we're not happy about that. We're really resentful that they're better. We sort of almost think it's like humility. And we wish we could get a better sense of ourselves. But we're just angry. How dare these other people be nicer, prettier, more happy, you know? It's a resentful feeling, a hurt feeling. Again, self-pity. All of the delusions are self-pity. So interesting. We want to be the one that's best. We want to be, you know, the best one. So the person who's, you know, in the group who's gorgeous but who's arrogant, that's what would happen when they meet people who are better than they. But the person who's self-confident, it's interesting. They're unself-conscious. They're content in who they are. And that person is the one who can be humble. That person is the one who can delight in everybody else's qualities. Oh, wow, your feet are even better than mine. I'm so happy for you. You can only do that if you're confident about yourself, can't you? And you can't praise another person if you're not confident, which is what arrogance is. Arrogance isn't confidence at all. It's scary, you know. So we don't think we're arrogant. We're not maybe in the conventional sense, you know, strutting about. But this pride, this delusion it's a very strong one in all of us, inevitably. And it's one of the main reasons we suffer. If you look at a delusion and you see how you suffer, now if you look at how you suffer in your life, you can check the delusions that you have. If you're never satisfied, always looking for something new, that's attachment. If you're always finding fault in other people, angry, fighting with people, arguing with people, finding fault, that's anger. If you're always thinking people don't see you as you really are, and you always feel hurt when people talk to you and they say the thing the wrong way and you feel offended, that's pride. So we recognise we've got them all. The way you suffer tells you the delusion you've got. And you all know you can't find the solution to the problem if you can't diagnose the problem, so we better diagnose the problem properly, hadn't we? We've got to know our own delusions. Jealousy, for example, it's interesting. It's completely related to possessiveness, to attachment, but it's also anger. You check jealousy. You look at when he leaves you and chucks you out for the younger version, let's say. Of course, the heart is broken. Your attachment is so pained, but you don't want him to be happy. That's anger. It's mixed very much with anger. You want him to suffer. It's painful because it's not you, but you're angry. that he's happy. You wish he would suffer. You pray that she leaves him too, you know, that she leaves him. Isn't it? So we need to identify, really look deeply into our own mind. The trouble with that is, you see, because the delusions are a story, they're talking about something. So we're usually preoccupied with the story. Well, she did this and she said that and she did this. What's your problem, Robina? He did this and he did this and he did this and this. No, 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 what's your problem, Robina? He did this and... No, 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 Robina, you're talking about him. What's your problem? It's very hard for us to do this. We can't even articulate. It's hard for us to look at the anger itself rather than hearing the voice, the story that anger is telling, which is all about him. It's hard for us to see the attachment itself and not the object we're so caught up in. This is the trick that we have to learn. And it's not something we've ever learned in our lives, you know, most of us. Because delusions in their nature are completely absorbed in the object. Completely, 100%. That's the words we're talking. The voice, it's there. There's the vivid thing in our mind, the thing we can see, the person, the gorgeous one or the ugly one. That's what we don't even know what anger is. We can't even look at the anger itself. We can't separate it from the object. And that's what we have to learn to do. That's being your own therapist. Then you can learn to change. Because then you can hear the story and then you can begin to change the concepts. And to start believing in the new one. You argue with yourself. You debate with yourself. So getting a handle on these first two scopes of practice, you now really are getting some incredible renunciation. You've really got it down. You know what causes suffering, your own suffering, it's karma and delusions. You've really worked on these. You're doing your four opponent powers. You're doing your practice every day. You're controlling your body, speech and mind. You're becoming, in other words, a really blissful person. You're doing all sorts of other practices too, you know. I haven't talked much about those. All your other practices are sort of like your push-ups, you know. You do your prostrations and your water bowls, all these things which you take on as and when you feel like it, according to your capability, you know. These extra sort of practices that give a rocket boost to the heart practice of controlling your body, speech and mind. So then slowly, slowly, having such renunciation now, such compassion for yourself basically, such respect for yourself now, such appreciation for yourself, such a good relationship with yourself, and awareness of yourself, and a real dignity and self-respect, then now you're qualified to help others. You now go to high school, to a university, you go to the compassion wing. Because until, you know, okay, in our daily lives, we're doing all of these stages every day. Sometimes we reach out to others, sometimes we work on our own mind. But from the point of view of what you're capable of doing, what level you're at, then it's impossible to actually have stable, clear compassion until you've achieved stable, clear renunciation, which is what you get from the first two scopes. In other words, you know you can practice a grade 5 piece even though you're only in grade 2. But you won't accomplish grade 5 until you've accomplished grade 4. And you can't accomplish grade 4 until you've accomplished grade 3. In that sense, it's very graded. But you can practice all of them, of course you can. So we're practicing all of these. We're practicing bodhicitta, we're practicing, you know, watching our minds, and we're practicing controlling our body, speech and mind, and we're practicing Tantra. So we're doing all. We're doing the postgraduate, university, and all of them. But one can only achieve a certain one after you've achieved another one. That's the structure here. That's what's implied by this structure. So compassion necessarily is more advanced. So it's very, in this way, you know, you can say, as His Holiness often says, you cannot, you know, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. Or as Rinpoche says, meaning well is not enough. You need wisdom. So that's in a general sense. What that means is that if you're not together to some extent in your own mind, which is what wisdom means if you've not lessened your delusions to some extent, then, you know, clearly you can't see past your own nose. How can you see what's going on, and how could you possibly know how to help a person? Because you're just seeing your own rubbish, you know. So the only way to be of benefit to anyone is if you've done the job yourself. It's obvious. If the only way you can teach another person piano is by knowing how to play it yourself. The only way to help a person's mind is to know your own mind. It's sort of obvious. But more specifically, you cannot have compassion until you've got renunciation. So what does that mean? What's renunciation? It's such a forbidding word, Well, as Rinpoche puts it, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so disgusting to you. He's used different examples. He said one time it's like using used toilet paper, or it's like being in a septic tank. Just the thought of another moment of attachment is so disgusting to you. So we can see we have a way to go. It's quite an advanced state of mind to be that aware, that so refined in your awareness of your mind and so clear about the suffering of the delusions. We can see that jealousy is painful. We can see that anger is painful. Sometimes it's hard to see attachment, because it's so linked to our pleasure, we can't separate them. And that's what we have to learn to do. But the point, even being more specific here, what renunciation is two things. One, the first one is the recognition that you are suffering and the wish to go beyond it. But the crucial one is, second, is the reasons why you are suffering. Because until you've decided, until you've found the cause of a problem, you can't solve the problem, can you? So you've got to first see there's a problem, and that's called suffering. And you've got to want to stop the problem. And that's a big one, to really get in touch with that. Then you have to know what the cause is, because until you know what the cause of your suffering is, how can you ever get rid of it? So right now, of course, we're up the creek without a paddle. We think suffering is caused by you. That runs all our experiences. So once we've got our head around that karma, my past karma, and my present neurotic delusions are the cause of my suffering. Once I've got that, then I'm on the way. And you could say that's renunciation. So once you've got that for yourself, you just transfer that to others, and that's compassion. One, you see that they are suffering and you find it unbearable and you want them to stop suffering. And two, and this is the crucial one, to real compassion, you now know why they are suffering. Not because of the bombing, not because of the mean pilots, not because of the hubby, but because of their past karma and their present delusions. Once you know that, then compassion is easy. Compassion for the pilots on September 11, compassion for the enemy, compassion for the people who harm you. It is not that difficult. Well, it is, but it's not, because you're doing the first work of doing the real job of getting in touch with yourself, understanding really what suffering is, not just the gross kind, but the suffering of the delusions. Really understanding how they are the cause, really tasting that, and having such respect for yourself, such kindness to yourself, and I'm not joking. That has to come. That's renunciation. It's a sign of incredible dignity and self-respect. When you've got that, then it's easy to have compassion. Not just for the victims, which is all we do now. We like to have compassion for victims. Or we have compassion for our people, whatever group that is. I remember this, it was always such a joke for me. When I was a hippie, I had compassion for all the, I didn't like all the straight people. They were the cause of the problem, weren't they? Then when I was a bit of a radical, like a lefty, I hated all the rich people. Then I was into sort of supporting the Black Panthers and all this. Then I hated all the white people. And then I was a bit of a feminist, so I hated all the male people. I mean, my groups kept changing, I had compassion for different groups. One year, I really had compassion for poor people. But next year, I hated one of those group of poor people who called men. So it shows, it's so ridiculous. The group keeps changing, the way we have our compassion, according to the group you're identifying with, And it's based on attachment. It's not based on external reality. So once you've got this view of karma, it's amazing actually. Once you begin to internalize that view, and of course it takes time and you have to think about it, if that's the view that you want to go with, and really internalize it, then when you see another person suffering, immediately you have compassion for them. But you don't instantly want to hit the person who did it to them, which is what we do now. You know straight away, due to their past karma, their past actions, they set themselves up. In other words, if you see a person who's an alcoholic, you have compassion, but you know they did it to themselves. You know that they weren't forced to drink. So you still have compassion for them. But they did it to themselves, didn't they? But we tend to think when it comes to other suffering that unless you're an innocent victim, you don't deserve compassion. And we have a strong view of innocent victim, remember, because we think we didn't ask to get born. We think we're all innocent victims. But as soon as we find out that there must be a cause within ourselves for why suffering happens, we then think, oh, well, you deserve it. But once you realise that's why everybody is suffering. That's why the people on September 11 died. That's why the pilots, they just change roles in this life, that's all. It's like one day, Johnny beats Mary, and she, and she comes running, Mummy, Johnny beat me. And you go, Johnny, stop beating. And you give Mary a hug. The next day, Mary beats Johnny, and Johnny comes running, Mummy, Mary beat me. And you give him a hug, and you go, Mary, stop beating. Just like that, from life after life after life after life, Buddha says. And this is why it's like a joke, We're all putting ourselves into this insane asylum, and then we run around each life forgetting that and then blaming everybody else. And then just deepening our grave every life. Because we follow our instincts, So Buddha says the main basis for having compassion for sentient beings is sentient beings' ignorance of cause and effect, and ignorance, finally, of emptiness, but ignorance of cause and effect. This is the basis. So when you begin to have this, then your mind can be much more calm. You can have much kindness towards people. You won't be angry all the time, finding fault, struggling, freaking out, You're thinking about karma is the method for that. Constantly owning that one. Reminding yourself, every single person is experiencing the fruit of their own actions. It's just like a law. It just happens that way, You have to remind yourself, because it's not the way we see things now. And even if we're Buddhists, we don't keep going to that one. We keep reinforcing the samsaric view, Half the time, it sounds a bit rude, but I think we Buddhists, we're just really like social workers. We like to do good, We're social workers who watch our breath. I know it's a bit mean, but hear it. It's we've got a very superficial view of what we think a Buddhist means, But if you look into Buddhism deeply, until you really think about karma, you haven't really got the essence of Buddha's teachings, actually. We've taken sort of elements. It's sort of like you take elements from basketball and you think, well, basketball's bouncing a ball, so you spend all your life bouncing a ball. Then you spend all your life running up and down a court. But the essence of basketball is getting the ball in the hoop, isn't it? If you miss this, you've missed the point. Well, the essence of Buddhism is understanding how come who you are and then how to change yourself. And the law of karma is the basis of this. It's the basis of all Buddha's philosophy. The view of his entire world view would collapse without the concept of karma. So you've got to factor it in, even just theoretically, to get used to what Buddha's thinking. You can't just take an aspect. Well, of course you can. You can just take the mindfulness part. You can take the breathing meditation part. You can take the one of even just being a nice person. That's okay. But it's helpful to get the big picture. So how do you develop this compassion? Because what Buddha's saying is, we can develop our minds to a degree that is actually quite stunning. This is the groundwork. You're setting yourself up in these first stages. Now we begin the actual real, you can almost say the real job now, of really beginning to expand our consciousness to encompass others. To become who we really are, which is a mind that is not dualistic, that identifies with others as if they were oneself. Because the concept of others is made up by the delusions. It's created by delusions. It's not realistic. You could say, if when you become Buddha and I become Buddha, you can say that we're the same Buddha. Right now there's a sense of separate selves. Those sense of separate selves is literally created by the delusions. And we reinforce that life after life after life. So compassion is taught in a series of about 11 little techniques. There's different ways of presenting it, you know. And then, of course, you go to Tantra, the most advanced practices, where you utilize a whole different level of type of techniques to simply continue to help you develop all these qualities. And we're going to be then touching on Lama's book here, you know, the tantric, this whole approach of what they call deity yoga, which is just this approach of, you know, utilizing the presence of the Buddhas and imagining them in certain ways and identifying with being them and saying mantras that are connected to them simply as a method to help you become a Buddha. They're all methods from the beginning of junior school to high school to university to, you know, postgraduate. The purpose is the same, just different levels of techniques, you know, levels of capability, levels of sophistication. So this, you know, this tradition in the Lam Rim of this series of techniques of developing compassion is coming from, you know, all of these tracing back, you know, to the great masters in India. And so this approach to compassion that's unique to this, the taste, the flavour of this set of practices is this flavour called exchanging self for others, which comes from Shantideva in the 8th century in India, and then from Atisha through, you know, this amazing radical approach to developing compassion and love for other beings. This approach called exchanging self for others. And the heart practice of doing that is called in Tibetan Tong Len, which means giving, taking. They don't have words like and or anything. They're very short and sweet in Tibetan. Giving and taking. This is sort of the essential technique, the heart technique. And we'll get to that. It's about the 5th, it's about the 8th or the 9th of these 11. You're sort of, again, gradually, psychologically priming yourself by thinking certain things, practicing certain ways of thinking, step by step by step, that culminate in this technique, which then is what manifests as this enormous levels of love and compassion, which then culminate in this thing called bodhicitta, which is the 11th. It's like the goal of this 11 little techniques. And there are series, you know, they're stages, one after the other. Next leads to the next, leads to the next, like they're gradual. So the first of these is like the root, and it's called equanimity. And this equanimity, you know, it's clearly, and it's an English word. Like all these words are just English, renunciation, equanimity, emptiness, but we have to obviously know the definitions. It's got to be very clear, because we all use these words in different ways, and it can be very tricky if we don't have the same definition. So here, this equanimity is very precise. It's referring to, when you've achieved this one, when you've got this equanimity, it's referring to a heartfelt recognition, like a real heartfelt recognition, an awareness, a recognition that enemy, friend, and stranger are the same. So the same, from what point of view? You know, you can say everything's the same, but what do you mean? From what point of view? From what perspective? Well, you can say from many points of view, you know. But the particular point of view here that you're trying to focus on is they're equal from the point of view that they each want to be happy. They each want to be happy. Now again, this is something really simple. So what you've got to do is then look for techniques and ways to hear this and think about it, to argue with the view we have now, ego's view, that they're absolutely not equal. Because as far as we're concerned right now, what runs the show mostly is the delusions, isn't it? You know, the one so what are they? There are 3 groups of people, basically, and there's no fourth. Enemies, friends, and strangers. You think of those 3 main states of mind we have: positive, negative, neutral. Well, the positive states of mind, you know, and there's negative states of mind and the neutral states of mind. Here we've got friend, enemy, and stranger. So what are they objects of? They're objects of the 3 main delusions. Sorry, I didn't mean the positive, negative, neutral. Forget that. I meant the 3 main delusions. You've got attachment. So what's the object of attachment? Friend. We have aversion, enemy, and we have indifference, profound, uncaring indifference, and that's stranger. So it's like attachment, aversion, and ignorance, isn't it? They're the 3 main delusions. The three main ones. And our minds, with these three categories, enemies, friends and strangers, you think in the world there's no fourth category. There's all the few beings that you are attached to, a few you don't like, and the vast majority, 99.99%, you simply couldn't care less about. They don't even come into your radar screen. Isn't it? This is the world. This is samsara. Giraffes, ants, dogs, humans, we all have it, these three. And that's the view of the universe we all live according to. But it's the story of, it's the universe created by delusions. So the delusion, obviously in relation to the friends, is attachment. The person looks divine. It's the person that, and you think, what is a friend? What we mean by friend? But when it comes to the delusion part of it, it's the person who does what I want, isn't it? Necessarily. Enemy, from the point of view of a delusion, an enemy is a person who doesn't do what I want, doesn't agree with me, does things against me. A friend is a person who does things for me, who helps me. An enemy harms me. Me, not my next door neighbour. That enemy can be loving to my next door neighbour. I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, that person is innately an enemy because they harm me. So we can see immediately our views are self-centered. Our view of the universe is everything is coming through the filter of the I. And we so take this for granted we don't question it, you know. So then of course a stranger is what? Is a person who neither harms nor helps me. They can be the worst enemy to somebody and the best friend. Couldn't care. As far as I'm concerned, they don't exist. So what do we have in relation to the friend? Huge attachment. You know, expect them to make us happy, possessiveness, expectation. They appear more gorgeous to us. They appear more gorgeous to us and they appear like the thing that'll make us happy, so then we have the expectations. That they must make me happy. And then I possess them as mine, you know. So what delusion do I have in relation to the enemy? Obviously, aversion, anger, even eventually wanting to harm. Look at the world. And what relationship do I have to the stranger? Complete indifference. You don't even go there. You know, you read the news, you know, and you read about my people, and you sort of completely focus on it. Oh my God, what happened, you know? You read about, you know, when I go through the papers, I see the heading Australia. Even though I'm an American now, I'm an American. I'm a citizen. I'm an American. I promised I'd bear arms for America. So I just visualised my bare arms. Or actually, no, when I went to my meeting with the lady in the what do you call it, INS, and I had to prove, you know, that I was qualified and everything. And the hard part was actually I'm always running in and out of the country. So you have to, in the 5 years, you've got your, you know, the previous one, your green card. You have to show that you weren't out of the country a day less than 50% of that time. And I think she spent 45 minutes checking all my dates, because there must have been 100, 200 dates. And I got in by like 24 hours. I just made it, you know. But the thing was, she was a very nice lady. She was married to a Nepalese man, and he was in Nepal right at that moment with their daughter. And she was sort of happy to see me, but she didn't show it because she's supposed to be very professional, you know. And anyway, what did she say? She finally came to the question. I forget exactly how the question was phrased, but will I be prepared to bear arms? I think it was the question. And I just looked her in the eye and I said, I promise I will do whatever it takes to benefit the people of the United States. And she took that as a yes. So I didn't have to lie or make a big song and dance about it, you know. So there you go. So why am I saying that? Oh yeah. That's right. So anyway, so what I'm saying here is that, yeah, so still though, even though I'm American, I still think about Australia, obviously, and I think like an Australian. I sound like an Australian. So when I read the paper, you know, you're reading the paper and you're reading all the different things. I read the New York Times and you're reading, you know, and I go, oh, there's Australia. Immediately you read it, whatever it is, because that's how our mind is, because it's yours, isn't it? So you go, you read all about John Howard, the Prime Minister said this and did that, you know, these things. So your mind naturally thinks that. But if you read another heading and it's a name you can't even say, you know, You don't even know where it is. Who cares? You don't read that news. You just gloss over it. It could all be about this tragedy, these suffering people, worse than what you've just read in your own country. But you couldn't care because they're strangers to you. We all know that experience. It's common. It's obvious. But if it's a country you really hate, you read, you cheer, you know. Oh, good, one more bomb. You understand? So we all have this attachment, aversion, and this kind of indifference. And it's so clear a distinction, isn't it? So then what we're trying to do in this equanimity meditation is just all these, even in the body, all these meditations in the compassion wing, these approaches, they're just approaches like everything else. They're all just views. And they're all really still continuing to work on your mind. But the main emphasis here is on others. You're working on your mind, but the object is others. The first wing, you're really intensely internal. You're looking at your own delusions. You're backing off and minding your own business and leaving others alone. Because delusions right now are totally caught up in others. Attachment is obsessed with others. Aversion is obsessed with others. So right now with delusions, we are only thinking of others, but from a wrong point of view, grasping at them or harming them. So we back away from that and we try to look at the delusions themselves to change them. But in the compassion wing, we're continuing to work on the delusions, but it's in reference now in a good way to others. The emphasis is to connect with others, to break down the barriers that separate us from others, to expand our consciousnesses, really, to encompass others. So equanimity. You know, there's so many ways you just do these meditations, and like I said, they're just thinking really. But because you get some focus first, and then you can do it in your meditation, where you do it in a more focused way. You go through it in a logical way. You think it through, or you can do it just in daily life with your eyes open. You know, and so the way you'd argue with yourself in terms of equanimity, what you're trying to establish. Okay, the goal of this little technique, this first one, is to establish in your mind, eventually in your heart, in a true way, as the truth, that actually the person who harms you, the person who helps you, and the person who's done neither, actually from their point of view, are the same. Now we have all these marvellous sayings that our mothers taught us, you know. Put yourself in their shoes, our mothers would tell us, wouldn't they? That's a very powerful statement. That's incredible if you think about it. It's mind-blowing. Put yourself in their shoes. Well, that's what you're doing here. Equanimity. It's really simple. So you just got to go. Let's say you don't like, you know, it's whatever, whoever you don't like. I don't care who you don't like, but, you know, let's just say we keep using poor old George Bush these days. And I'm not saying I don't like George Bush, just because I'm using the example. I'm not saying that. I don't have any opinions about people. They can do what they like. Of course I have opinions, excuse me, but I try not to put it on the people, you know. You leave the people alone. So then let's just say you don't like George Bush, and you can see, a lot of people don't like George Bush. Okay, good example for this reason. So they depict him in such a powerful way. And you notice this, when we talk about a person we don't like, you really can hear that it's always speaking as our opinion. That's always speaking as an opinion. But we think our opinion is the fact. That's why all those cartoonists draw a monkey, because that's what they're seeing. Their mind is projecting that. So then you know, to do this equanimity meditation, it's very good to take a person like that, whom you really don't like. And especially if he's a politician, you sort of think it's like up there, definitely not good. If, let's say, you don't like his politics. I mean, if you do, then you take a different enemy. Doesn't matter. So you'd look at the person, and then you try and put yourself in that person's shoes, and you think of it. Let's say you have him in the enemy category. You think of them in front of you. You visualize him. So you think from his side, you know, from his side. Just try and think. He's a human being, right, who gets up in the morning, goes to the toilet, washes himself, does all the same things as we do. You strip away all the other things. Well, even just doing that is really quick to see. It's not different from your friend. They both get up in the morning. They both want to have a shower. They both get constipation. They both nearly choke on pretzels. You know, they both worry about what people think about them. They both fight with their wives. They both want to be happy. I mean, it's sort of really very obvious. But because we're so caught up in our view, we don't even want to think that. I mean, you don't even want to think that George Bush wants to be happy, because that means you've got to think of him as a human being. And it's very inconvenient when you don't like somebody, because you have to do that. So it really doesn't take too much. You just have to be very courageous to see how they're the same. They don't want, from their point of view, not saying that their actions are the same. Hitler and Mother Teresa's actions were clearly different. But it doesn't even take too much, if you can bear to do it, that Hitler and Mother Teresa are the same from the point of view that they're driven by the wish to be happy. Maybe, okay, one was more driven by his wish to harm others. That was his method of getting happy. And Mother Teresa's, her method was to benefit others. But the bottom line, you know, you put an animal there, it's the same. An ant, it's the same. They want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. Just look at their behaviour. If you try to punch them, they try to get away, you know. They both have problem with their bowels. I mean, right at the most basic level, it's not too difficult to prove that they're the same from the point of view of wanting to be happy. It's just that we don't want to think that, especially if it's the enemy who's harmed us, even close up, like your mum or, you know, the rapist or something. It's too painful for our minds. Because why? Because anger and rage and hurt and resentment are fully in the way. We can't get past them, you know. And then the vindictiveness and the blame and all this. That's what prevents us from seeing this. So even just this first step in these 11 techniques, just to see that these three people are equal in their wish to be happy, it's pretty intense already. You can do it on the street. You can just notice people in a group. Even in this group, I mean, it's almost embarrassing to think about it, but there are some people we prefer to others, you know. Some people we haven't really noticed. Some we dislike. They annoy us. It's always like this. We just do it with each other very quickly, you know. It doesn't take long. But anyway, there's many ways you can argue to see this, to see how illogical the delusions are, you know. I mean, one argument, and this is a really obvious one, the person you were in love with 6 months ago, who was in the attachment category, suddenly now is the person who's in the enemy category, because you can't stand the sight of him. This is a really good one to see, how absurd it is, you know. So we're not saying that he didn't do different actions. Of course, 6 months ago he didn't hit you, but now he did hit you. But that's not the discussion. That's not the point. What they did to you isn't the point. And if we look at attachment and aversion, that's the way we judge people now. So in other words, because a person is kind to me, that a person appears in a good light to me, therefore I want them to be happy. Because a person harms me, they appear in an ugly light to me, and that's why I don't want them to be happy. So that's the reasoning, the logic that ego uses to then think that they're different. Another example I use from my mind is if I think of myself right now, I can think of 3 people, let's say, we all can do this, one who absolutely adores you, one who really hates you, and one who couldn't care less, who just knows you enough to put you there. You with me? So think of these 3. But now you're the person who is the friend for that one. You appear gorgeous, and you look all dazzled and beautiful to them. And they like you because of that. You appear happy and lovely. This person, the enemy, can't stand the sight of you. You look like this demon to them. And the person who's a stranger, for whom you're a stranger, you just look kind of vague and meaningless, you know. So the feelings they have in their mind are only based on their own view. But you, friend, enemy and stranger right here, are the same person. You're identical. So you know when the person who loves you looks at you, you still want to be happy. When the person who hates you looks at you, just the same person, you still want to be happy. And when the person who doesn't care about you looks at you, you want to be happy. So you just reverse that. Enemy, friend and stranger. They all want to be happy. It's something so fundamental. You think about this wish to be happy, it's what drives all of us. No one has to teach us this. And it's the common ground between us. So, of course, there's a crucial reason why you want to use this as the main thing to see that's equal between them. Because love, which we're aiming to develop, about the 5th stage, 5th technique, is the thought, may you be happy. So once you can establish that a person from their side wants to be happy, then it's just a question of time before you can eventually say, may you be happy. That's why this is the one. I mean, to say that they're equal from this point of view, they're also equal from others. They're equal from the wish not to suffer. They're all equal from the point of view of, you know, getting tired. But we're using this one in particular because that's the basis of love. The wish that someone be happy is the basis of loving them. Wanting them to be happy is the meaning of love. So it's 11 o'clock, a little break. Food for thought. If you're going to talk, talk about this. If not, be silent.